Now, the world of Breath of the Wild is quite interesting. There's a lot going on after all. You have evil guardians roaming the land, people who try to rebuild their life, and more. In general, it's a world that feels very alive. However, there's one thing that kind of confuses me, to be honest. Why are there so many darn KOROKS in the game? There are like 1 billion of them throughout the world. But why is that the case? The rest of the world is in ruins and tons of towns have been destroyed, so why are there so many KOROKS? Well, today we will find out. Now let's dive right in. Now, in Breath of the Wild, the KOROKS can be found all over Hyrule, hiding throughout the land. And you must solve a wide array of puzzles in order to make them appear, and for finding them you get a Korok seed, which can then be traded with Hetsu. This is a very large Korok first encountered on the path to Kakariko Village, and all he does is upgrade your inventory. Now, they are by far the most varied race in the game, with over 913 different KOROKS overall, and their home is found in the center of the Lost Woods where the Great Deku Tree resides. This place is also known as Korok Forest, and many of them can be found here, although most of them will hide as soon as Link gets even close. Now, it's stated that most people cannot see KOROKS actually, and that's also why some are confused as to how Link can even see them at all. Although I have to say, there are some who can actually see them, like the Hetena-born merchant Agus, who says he was spooked by a big tree ghost by the lake. So apparently he can see them, but this isn't the case for most people. Now, in the end, after collecting all 900 Korok seeds, Hetsu will tell you that all the KOROKS have returned to the Korok Forest. But for some reason, they can still be found in their original locations in the world. However, we will ignore that, to be honest, because, as you can imagine, it doesn't make any sense at all. So why are there so many KOROKS compared to all the other races seen in Hyrule, like the Hylians, Zoras, and Gorons? We see barely any of those, but when it comes to the KOROKS, we see 1 million of them throughout the game. Well, interestingly enough, there's one thing that can actually explain all of this. Not just why they are seen so much, but also why they are hiding everywhere, and why they went back to the forest after being found by Link. And in order to explain all of this, we will have to look at one event in Hyrule's history. And this one is the bloodiest by far compared to everything else we have seen before. I'm talking about the Great Calamity, an event that changed the entire world. Now, this was a period of mass destruction in Hyrule caused by the return of Calamity Ganon, after being imprisoned for 9,900 years, which is quite a long time. Now, this event led to many deaths and almost every structure across Hyrule crumbling into ruins. It turned into a shadow of its former self. Now, in the end, Hyrule Castle itself fell under Ganon, and King Rhoam, Link, and many others were killed during this awful disaster. And so, with Hyrule Castle having fallen, and the army of Hyrule with no leader, they fell back to the one place they could, the fortress that protected Akkala. And of course, this also fell in time. They really didn't stand a chance. Now, due to the Great Calamity, the population of monsters in Hyrule significantly increased, while all the other races were seen a lot less, because they died. In the end, Ganon achieved much of the destruction by possessing the same guardians and divine beasts who once bested him before, and now they are still under his influence and roam the world, threatening everyone who even gets close. Now, in the end, Link was placed in a special shrine that brought him back to life. And so, 100 years later, he was running around the world once again, beating bokoblins with sticks, throwing rocks, falling off cliffs, running out of stamina, drowning, you know, the usual. And that ruined and scarred world is what we see in Breath of the Wild. It's a version of Hyrule that is in ruins, with barely any friendly living beings in it. And interestingly enough, this terrible event that changed the world forever could explain why all the KOROKS are hiding, and why there are so many compared to all the other beings in the world. First of all, let's look into why they are hiding across the world. I bet most of you can already feel where this is going. Personally, I think all those KOROKS in the world went into hiding as soon as the Great Calamity returned. You gotta remember, their leader is the Great Deku Tree. He is basically the father of all KOROKS. We found this out in games like Ocarina of Time as well as The Wind Waker. It's stated multiple times in those games that he created them. And in Breath of the Wild, we can see that the Master Sword is placed right before the Great Deku Tree. And so, because of all of this, and also his deity status, he knows what's going on in the world at almost any time. Heck, that could also be a reason why they are found so much in the world. They are like the Great Deku Tree spies. Most people can't see them after all, and they are located all over the world, so I bet they must know quite a bit about what's going on. And to be honest, he has sent them out for missions before. We saw that in The Wind Waker, for example. Although I will admit I wasn't going for this angle at all. This was just something I came up with while writing this script. Now, personally, I think the Great Deku Tree is important in this story because he can warn the KOROKS, allowing them to hide and potentially survive everything that was happening. He even ends up seeing a defeated Zelda who brings the broken Master Sword back to the pedestal. And so he must have known that the world of Hyrule was basically doomed, or at least not in a very good place. This alone could already explain why the KOROKS are hiding in all kinds of different places throughout the world. They knew the world was basically ending, and so they went into hiding. They ended up using their flying, hiding, and magical skills in order to not get caught by the monsters and guardians that now roam the land. And because of this, a lot of them ended up surviving. And it's quite understandable, because they can be very hard to find. Most Hylians have never seen them after all. And all of this is a good thing, because as we have seen in The Wind Waker, they are crucial for restoring life to the world. In that game, we can see that they are planting trees and are trying to create certain ecosystems. It could also be that a lot of the forests and plants that we see in Breath of the Wild were created by the KOROKS after the Great Calamity ended. So clearly a lot of them ended up surviving because of this, and that's a really good thing. Apparently the Great Deku Tree knew what was up and was able to warn them in time for them to hide. And so they could survive and rebuild the world afterwards. But why did they go back to the Korok Forest then? Well, there are actually two very good reasons for that. First of all, this place is one of the hardest locations to get into in the entire world of Hyrule. It is sealed off from everything. While the Korok Forest is fun, beautiful, and light-hearted, everything around it is dark and incredibly hard to navigate. And that's because it is actually the Lost Woods. And this version is sort of similar to the one seen in Ocarina of Time. And I gotta say, this place is quite special. It's basically some sort of magical maze of trees, and taking a wrong path here will set you back big time, because you end up back at the entrance. Now, this iteration of the woods can be navigated by following the changing direction of the wind, seen through the thick fog and blowing embers of small torches. That's the only way how you can beat it. So you can get through it all, but believe me, there isn't any monster in Hyrule that can get past this confusing and quite spooky barrier. I bet even groups like a Yiga can't figure out how to get past this weird obstacle. So that's one reason why all the KOROKS go back to the Korok Forest. It's a lot safer there than anywhere else really. So after being found and seeing that the world isn't in utter chaos anymore, all of them decided to head home. And the second reason why they do this is most likely to let the Great Deku Tree know that they are still alive and to receive protection. He doesn't necessarily know where they are after all, I think so at least, so I bet he would appreciate it to know who is still around. And aside from that, the Great Deku Tree is a deity, so he can offer them some form of protection. We even saw this in other games. And I think Ocarina of Time shows this off the best. Here, in the early stages of the game, when Link is just a child, Kokiri Forest is a beautiful and peaceful place. You can run around and do whatever. There are no monsters whatsoever. And the Kokiri who later became the KOROKS could live here in peace. But right before Link leaves, the Great Deku Tree dies. And when he returns as an adult, the place has become overrun with Deku Babas, Mad Scrubs, and Octoroks. And the once happy Kokiri inhabitants are now confined to their homes because of this. But once Link defeats Phantom Ganon in the Forest Temple and the Sage of Forest is freed, a Deku Tree Sprout is born. And the Kokiri Forest once again returns to normal. So clearly the Great Deku Tree protects them in some way from evil. Now, we don't know how he does this, but he can do it for some reason. So I bet all the KOROKS go to Korok Forest after being discovered in order to be completely safe. Clearly, if you think about it, all of this is quite logical. There's a good reason why the KOROKS survived everything that happened. They can easily hide, fly away, can use magic to some extent, have a special deity that protects them, and also a magical forest which is hard to navigate, creating a natural barrier around their home. So clearly, these little guys had some huge advantages compared to all the other creatures seen in Hyrule. And in the end, it's all because of the Great Deku Tree. Thanks to him, these creatures were able to live and even survive something horrible like this. And that's why there are so many of them in the game. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to click the subscribe button and the bell so you won't miss anything. Well, hopefully, that's how it works according to YouTube. Be sure to like and tell me in the comments what you think about KOROKS. Are they great? Are they stupid? Are they big? Are they small? Tell me and I'll rate them all. I'm a rhyming goblin now.